Welcome to Excel 2010 Statistics video number 3. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, click on the link below the video. Now, we're going to start on the Sheet tab Calculations. And in this statistics class, one of the requirements is that you took algebra. But even before algebra, we knew what's called the order of operations, right? So when you make calculations, you do everything in the parentheses first, then exponents, and then left to right multiplying and dividing, and left to right adding and subtracting. So that's kind of a prerequisite for this class. But now that we're going to use Excel, we need to learn the symbols that Excel uses for formulas. This whole video is nothing but calculations with formulas and functions. Now, parentheses, there it is. Exponents, oh, it's a caret, Shift 6. Multiplication is an asterisk. And you should use these from the number pad. It's easier and faster. You don't have to do Shift to get to this. Shift 8 is what you'd have to use if you're using the normal number pad. Division, adding, subtracting. Now, there's some other symbols. We may have to join together a number and what's called a comparative operator. So for some of our data analysis or a statistical analysis, we're going to say, hey, count all of the sales greater than $5,000. So we'll have to join what's called a comparative operator, greater than or equal to, and the number 500. So we'll see how to do that coming up. That's the join symbol, is this. It's also called, does anyone know what it's called? I heard someone out there say it. It's called the ampersand, if I even know how to spell that. Ampersand. Also, we may occasionally, and we'll see an example of this just in a moment, we may have text in formulas like the average is, and we want that in a text formula. And you always have to put text in double quotes. And then finally, these characters down here are comparative operators. So sometimes we want to say, is this number equal to that number? Is something greater than? Is something greater than or equal to, less than or equal to? And we may even occasionally have to use not. Is this thing not equal to that? Now, these are unusual if you've never used Excel before, or computers before, when you compare it to how you do it on paper for math. These two symbols have to be separately typed in. And we'll see an example of that coming up. Greater than or equal to. There's no single character like there is in math. All right, now let's go look at examples. Right, this whole video is just about formulas and functions. And I know for some of you, this will be your first time doing calculations in Excel. Now, here's a calculation we'll do in Chapter 3. We need to take a particular number and compare it to its average and then square it. Now, compare is not really the right word. We're going to take x and subtract average and then square it. Now, the order of operation is going to come in here because we have to do subtraction before our exponent. Now, this is our first formula we've ever done. If you want to tell Excel you're doing a formula, you have to type an equal sign as the first character in the cell. Now, I'm going to do open parentheses. And you take your cursor and you click on the cell with the formula input. That says I'm going to look at whatever's in A23. Then you type a subtraction sign, and then you click with your mouse. Now, I just clicked on my mouse, boop, and got that. And then I typed a subtraction. I haven't clicked on this cell yet. There's an alternative to using your mouse. And if you like keyboard stuff, it's faster. Up arrow. Now, notice I did up arrow twice. Oh, now I got the wrong number. But as long as the dancing ants are still dancing around, I can arrow back. Oh, I went too high. No problem, arrow back. All right, so you can use your mouse or your arrow keys. The rule of thumb is if the cell reference is way far away, don't use your mouse. But if it's really close, the mouse is faster. Now, we have to do a close parentheses. And then Shift 6 for caret. That means exponent, and then a 2. Now, so that's a calculation. I'm going to hit Enter. And there it is, 12.25. Now, if I get my x value is actually 8.75, I can type it here. And before I hit Enter, watch right here, and it instantly updates. right? This will be a calculation. So there's our first formula. That's pretty cool. Now we're going to come over here and we're going to do a couple of formulas that involve using functions. This formula here used parentheses, exponent notation, a typed in number 2, and open parentheses. Here we're just going to use a built-in function. Now here's what I don't want to see from anybody who takes a test. If I want to add these up, I don't want you to go like this. And I know some of you have worked out there in the working world and never got formally trained in Excel, but that is a horrible formula for all sorts of reasons. One is it takes too long to enter in. Also, these kind of formulas don't allow structural updates, which I would cover in an Excel class. But if you were ever to insert a row, this kind of formula would not update. So don't do that. I'm going to click Escape. Escape gets you, it removes the formula. And actually, Escape does not remove the formula if you've already put the formula in the cell. Escape just gets it back to whatever it was before you put it into edit mode. Now here's another formula you never want to do. You never want to type this in. And again, sorry to say I've been teaching this class a long time, and I still get formulas like this. You can't do formulas like that. Why? Because it violates the whole idea of a spreadsheet. If I enter that formula in, and by the way, it will count. And by the way, this one will work also. It's just inefficient. It takes too long to type out, and it doesn't allow structural updates. Actually, I'm going to copy this formula in edit mode. Control C for copy. And I'm going to put this in edit mode and Control V just to leave those up there. Now, what's the problem with this one right here? If I change this to 25, ooh, that doesn't update. So you never, this is called hard coding your numbers. Don't ever do that. Don't hand in tests. Even later when we do our distribution functions, don't be tempted. Always put your numbers in cells and refer to them with cell references. So obviously, those are examples of how I do not want you to build your formulas. They're inefficient. Now here, we're going to use the sum function. Now, in the last video, I did it real quick, but let me show you here on the Home tab. There's something called the Sum button. That's sigma. That little symbol right there is sigma. You'll see it a lot in the textbook. It means to add. It's the Greek letter used in statistics a lot. Now, watch this. I'm going to click on this. Boop. And what Excel does when you click on a function, whether it's sum or average or median later or standard deviation, it tries to be polite and guess. So what is it doing? It thinks you want D26 to D27. Well, that's not what you want. As long as the dancing ants are dancing around, you can still redirect the formula. Just as we saw over here with our arrow keys, dancing ants moving, you can redirect it. So always pay attention. Enter your sum function or your average function. Look and see if it's correct. If it's not, redirect it. Now I'm going to use my mouse. I'm going to click and drag. That big, thick cursor right there is called a selection cursor. Wherever I go, selection cursor, it will highlight. So I click and drag. When I get the right range, then I hit Enter. Now let's look at another function in statistics when you add them all up and divide by the count. In statistics, we call that the mean. In normal language, we call it the average. So the name that they chose in spreadsheets is average. Now I'm going to type this one slightly different. Here I use the button up here. I'm going to type equals AVO. So if you know the names of your functions, in this class, we will use the same functions over and over. Norm, SDIST, median, mode, average, sum, over and over and over. So it's faster to type them. You can, once you get a drop-down list, and it's filtered by what you have typed here, you can either click on it or double-click on it. Let me back. Or when you type AV, you can down arrow. And once you get the one you want, you can double click. Or you can simply, after a while, you know if you type AVE, oops, AVER, that's the one you want. So then now I can just hit Tab. So average. And then it wants your some numbers. Selection cursor, dancing ants around the right number of cells. Now, here's another trick. This close parenthesis is required for a function like this. But if it's a simple function like average, sum, standard deviation, etc., you don't need to type that last parentheses. Save yourself an extra keystroke and hit Enter. Now, let's come up here, and I want to put this into edit mode. Edit mode is the F2 key. F2 puts it in edit mode, and then you can look at it. So if you ever need to check, that's a good way to do it. Now, you can double click to put a cell into edit mode. Sometimes that gets into trouble when we have bigger formulas, because maybe you accidentally highlight something and delete it or something like that. I'm going to click Escape. I just got into trouble there, right? So I'm going to click Escape and revert to the previous formula I entered. F2 just allows you to put it in edit mode, put the cursor at the end. Now I want to enter this function in, Enter. Now, mode. Mode is something we'll study in Chapter 3. It just looks through all the numbers and tells you which one occurs most frequently. Now, I'm going to show you how to search for a function one time at the beginning of this class. And then basically, we're never going to do that again, because we are going to use a certain set of functions over and over and over. So typing them out will probably is how we'll do it. However, I do want to show you. So you click in the cell, and we want to count the mode, the one that tell us which number occurs the most frequently. You come up, and this is called the formula bar. That button right there is called the insert function, or I call it the f of x button from algebra, f of x, function with variable x. I'm going to click on that, and it gives us the insert function dialog box. You can type something and search for it. I'm going to type mode. Now, again, all the calculations we do in this class have standard names. So you type standard deviation for the population or mode, and it's going to pop right up. Now, there's going to be a bunch of choices here. And this is an example of an older function. This is an example of one of the newer functions. But regardless, you can click on any one of these and read down here what it does. This is actually great for if you guys are in other accounting classes or finance classes or math classes or engineering classes. You come through and you can literally find functions for all of your calculations. All right, so you read this right here, returns the most frequently occurring or repetitive value in an array or range of data. That's it. I'm going to click OK. One advantage of doing it this way is that the function will be listed here, and they'll have what are called argument text box. And for this function, it's no big deal. We just enter a range. But there'll be descriptions down here. So if you get stuck later when we're doing binom dist functions, you can search for your binomial distribution function and then come here, and it'll actually give you a hint about what should go in each argument. Again, in this class, we're going to do things so many different times that you'll get the hang of it probably. Just put your formula in the cell. I'm going to, with my cursor in this text box, grab the title bar and scoot it out of the way, and then simply with my cursor, select it. The dancing answer going. I see that's OK. It actually gives me a preview of the answer. It also shows me a preview of the data. I'm going to click OK. All right, so MODE.SNGL, which is 88. Now, let's do another one, equals standard deviation. And again, you pick the one you want. This is a sample, so I'm going to select the sample one, highlight the data, and enter. Now, our next, so those are examples of functions, sum, average, mode, single, STD, standard deviation of the sample, where we just simply highlight a range. Our next function, we're going to try and count how many numbers up here are greater than or equal to 90. So we're actually going to have two inputs into our function. We're going to have to highlight the numbers to tell the function, hey, look through these. And then we're going to have to give it some criteria. All right, equals, and we're going to use the COUNTIF function. If only I could spell. Right? If you can't spell, then you can select the one from here, COUNTIF. Now, we'll use this a lot in this class. Not only the textbook, but the videos will use this function over and over again. Now, what it needs is it needs a range. Oh, yeah, the values to look at, comma, and they don't have to be numbers. They can be words or all sorts of things. And then the criteria. Well, we've already decided what our criteria is. Let's greater than or equal to 90. But here's how we're going to do it. we're actually going to have to use a comparative operator, greater than or equal to, and then join it to our formula input, 90. So this is kind of a syntax aspect of formulas you're going to have to learn, because we're going to use COUNTIF and COUNTIFs a lot. You put in double quotes your comparative operator, greater than, equal to, end double quote. Now we have to join it. So we use their join symbol, Shift 7. And then you click or arrow up to get your cell reference. This greater than or equal to joined with 90 now becomes the criteria for the COUNTIF. And again, I promise you we'll do that a lot of times. I know it's startling for some of you who have never used Excel before, but we'll get the hang of it. All right, so now 2. There's 2 of them. This one and this one. What happens if we change the criteria to 80? 4. Instantly it updates. I'm going to Control Z. What is Control Z? Undo. Same thing as going up to the undo button up here. Now let's look at our next function. We want to count values between 50 and 100. And it has to be inclusive. Now, what inclusive means is that the 50 and the 100 are included in the interval. Now, later we'll build frequency tables, and we will have lots of intervals like this. Now, we want to talk a little bit about what kind of criteria we have here. Well, we have 2. There's 1, 2 criteria. So we're going to have something like greater than or equal to 50 and less than or equal to 100. We have equals on both sides because it's inclusive. Actually, some of the intervals we'll look at later in the class, they'll have an equal sign on only one side. Nevertheless, 2 criteria. And notice we use the word and. Whenever you see and, it means both must be true for the thing to be counted. Let's just take a look up here. Let's take our 2 criteria or logical tests. I come up here and I say, is 100 greater than or equal to 50? True. Is this 100 less than or equal to 100? True. Because we get 2 trues, that number is counted. We'd get 2 trues here. Ooh, what about this one? Is it greater than or equal to 50? False. Is it less than or equal to 100? True. Because we get 1 false and 1 true, it will not be counted. So anytime you have and or between criteria like this, we have to get 2 trues for it to be counted. Now let's see the function that we use. Well, it's going to be almost like COUNTIF. But notice on our little drop down here, we see an S and a not a S. So you can probably guess the difference. COUNTIF without the S has only 1 criteria. COUNTIFs can have as many as you want. Actually, maybe it's like 255. I don't think we'll ever have more than 2 in this class. All right, so I double-clicked that and inserted it. Now, the screen tip here will help us input our what are called function arguments. We have a range and a criteria. Well, we know we have 2 criteria. The range is going to be the same both times. So I'm simply going to highlight it with my mouse. Now, when you're using screen tips, it's polite. The current function argument is bold. That means, hey, put this one in. But once you're done, the screen tip also reminds you you've got to put a comma. There's a little comma there. So type comma. Oh, that is polite. Now it's saying, hey, I need the criteria 1. So I'm going to type, just like we did the previous formula, our comparative operator goes into double quotes. And then we use the join, Shift 7, and I click on my lower end. So the lower end to this interval, anything in this list has to be greater than or equal to. Now, I should have mentioned that up on here. The way I always think of it is the little less than and the equal sign is pointing towards the number. And the big side of this alligator, right, the big one is pointing towards all of these. So when it evaluates this particular criteria, all these items have to be bigger because the alligator's open mouth is pointing towards all of these. All right, so there's our criteria, comma. We actually have to repeat like this. So we have our criteria range 2, and then comma, and our second criteria. So it says criteria 2. this one has to be less than. So double quotes, less than or equal to, and double quotes, and ampersand. All right, so we have our comparative operator and our join symbol. So now I simply click on the upper end. And that's it. I close parentheses and enter. By the way, you notice my cursor didn't, most of us in Excel go enter, and it goes down, right? And then if we want to look at the formula, we have to come back up here. Well, if you're in edit mode, instead of hitting enter, you can hit Control Enter, and it keeps it selected. That's handy if you're going to immediately format it or copy it or doing something like that. We'll see how to copy formulas a couple of videos ahead. So looks like I got the right answer. Now I'm going to change my input here. I'm going to say so less than or equal to 90. And now there should be 2, right, our criteria. So it's between 50 and 90. Well, that one and that one are counted. Neither one of these are counted anymore. I'm going to undo that, Control Z. All right. Still another type of formula. Sometimes we will, well, let's review what we did. Up here, we had cell references and operators and numbers. Up here, we had a single function with a range. Here, we had to enter 4 arguments, right? A range, criteria, and a cell reference joined together. So there's 4 things. So our next example, we're actually going to mix cell references, operators, and a function together in one formula. So in this example, we have revenue and expenses. And I would like to calculate the net income. So net income is all the revenue minus all the expenses. So I'm going to type an equal sign. That equal sign as the first character in the cell means you're telling Excel I'm creating a formula. And then I'm going to click on the revenue. So we have an equal sign and a cell reference, minus, and now I'm going to type the sum function. So you can literally just type a function right in the middle of a larger formula. Once I have my open parentheses, I can highlight my expenses. Close parentheses. Now that formula, I'm going to Control Enter. And it calculates 255. I put it back into edit mode with F2. Notice the small letters popped up to capital. Now the advantage to this formula is obvious. For small values, you could go this minus this minus this minus this. But for larger formulas, it would be a real hassle. And so this is a nice compact formula. Again, cell references, math operator, and a function. We could change this to 500, and then we have $5 of profit. Ooh, bummer. I'm going to Control Z. Now, so far, we have seen all the formulas we've seen are calculating formulas, meaning calculating a number answer. Here we want to look at a text formula. We mentioned that text has to be in double quotes. So I want this formula to say the average is whatever the average is. And we're going to have to come up and get our, let's see, where is our average? It's right there, 82.88. So this is an actual text formula. It's like a label. So I'm going to type an equal sign, and I want to mix words with a number. So the words have to be in double quotes. So I open double quotes, and I'm going to say the average is, and I'm going to type a space, and then end double quote. Now I have to join this text to that number because I want it to actually be words in the cells mixed with numbers. So I have to use that ampersand again, Shift 7, the join symbol. Now I'm going to scroll up. Now the way I scrolled is I use my wheel on my mouse, and I'm going to click on that cell reference with the average. Scroll back down, and I can see I have my formula. So when I hit Enter, pretty cool. The average is 82.8. Now the beauty of this is if I change any of these numbers here, right, not only does this change to 85, but this also changes to 85. So sometimes you have formulas like this off the side. And in fact, in this class, Again, you're going to have about, I'm going to create all of these files from scratch for our class, and there will be a lot of informative, helpful hints built with text formulas like this, like off to the side. Now, notice this gives us an error. That is an OK message when it's when we have a mode function. It just means there aren't any, not available. Now I'm going to change this back to 88. And so now it gives us 88. All right, two more things. So this is a text formula. We've seen calculating and text. We're also going to use some logical formulas. In later parts in the class where we want to ask a question like, is a particular number greater than some other number? So in this case, I want to ask the question, is mode greater than the average? And all I want to see is true or false in the cell. So here we're going to type an equal sign. And I want to ask the question, is mode greater than? So I'm going to come up and I'm going to click on the mode. I'm going to type a comparative operator greater than. And then I'm going to click on the average. So we can see the answer should be true, right? So here, equal sign, cell reference, comparative operator. Anytime you have a comparative operator actually inside the formula, not like in the COUNTIF function, but right sitting next to cell references like that, you will always get either a true or a false. So those are the only two possible answers for a true-false formula. These are also called logical formulas. Now I want to save the best trick for last here in this video. Now, our goal for this last example is to add up this whole column of sales. And we're going to learn 3 really important keyboard shortcuts. Now, the first thing is I have a column of data, and I don't know how many bits of data there are. How tall is this column here? So our first keyboard shortcut we're going to look at is how to jump to the bottom of the current range, or the last item in a column. The way you do that is with Ctrl down arrow. Wow, and instantly you can see 641. So that's a big column of numbers to add. Now, to jump to the top, we can simply Ctrl up arrow. Now, before we see our formula, another thing that we will do in this class is we'll have to format numbers sometimes. If they're sales numbers, maybe we want dollars or yens. If they're percentages, maybe we want to apply the percentage format. But check this out. If I was going to apply a number format, I could come up here and apply this, but I'd have to highlight this whole column, right? If I'm dragging this would take a long time, right? You could see I'm only down to the hundreds. So there's a keyboard shortcut. Now, whereas Control down arrow jumps to the bottom, if you want to highlight all the way to the bottom, instead of Control down arrow, you hold Control and Shift together. So Control Shift down arrow. Now I can simply apply some formatting. And by the way, we'll talk a lot about number formatting, these number formatting here in an upcoming video. All right, now let's do our last important calculation here. I want to add these all up. Now, there's a keyboard shortcut for the auto sum. It's Alt equals. And if you forget, just hover your cursor, and your screen tip will remind you Alt equals. It's the only function that has a keyboard shortcut. Why? Because it's the most common function. So I'm going to Alt equals. As we saw before, it doesn't always guess right. But here, the dancing ants happen to be right at the top. So all I have to do is Control Shift down arrow. So what that means, and I'm going to use my scroll arrow to scroll back up to show you, is we can, instead of using our mouse to go all the way down, just do Control Shift down arrow. So we saw Control Shift down arrow works if you're highlighting cells to do something like formatting, but it also works inside of a function. All right, so I hit Enter, and there is our total. All right, so that's our intro to formulas and functions. There's a lot there. I also have notes, like all the little keyboard shortcuts and important things about COUNTIFs. There's some notes there. When we come back in our next video, we'll talk about number formatting. All right, see you next video.